On this episode of SENSimilla, we will be talking to one of the most beloved names in the entire cannabis industry. If you have ever enjoyed strains like Sour Diesel, Stardog, OG Kush, or his own namesake, Chemdog, then you owe a debt of gratitude to this man right here. Also a famed glassblower in his own right, my guest took a big risk when transitioning from the legacy growing scene to legal retail, and he is now the head of cultivation at Massachusetts dispensary group Canna Provisions. Greg, Chemdog, Krzanowski, welcome to SENSimilla. I know we just went over saying your name 10 times before starting, but of course I'm going to probably screw it up in the first introduction. Thanks for being here, man. I appreciate you. I know you're a busy dude.
No problem, Will. No problem. I'd love this. No problem.
We have been working together tangentially. Our companies have been working together for the better part of a year and a half, almost 2 years now. So it's nice to finally meet you. We've never met before.
No.
So before we get into this, I have to ask the most pressing question. Is there a letter W in the word dog?
Not in my Chemdog.
You probably know this, but this is a huge point of contention for internet weed nerds across the world, and I would like you to settle it once and for all.
It's funny because people like question me, and I'm like, dude, I was a guy that labeled the plant in 1991, and I labeled it Chemdog. So that's where that's
There you have it, weed nerds across the internet. No W.
So Top Dog does it out of respect for. Sorry. So Top Dog.
Cool. I put a sign on the outside of my door that says "Kindly fuck off." So if anybody comes to the door, they'll at least see that.
So I did a JJ from Top Dog Seeds spells it DAWG out of respect for me. We don't. I think back in I want to say where I think it went sour with the name DAWG was Brett from Apothecary out in California decided to start calling his cut Chemdog. And spelling DAWG, and it kind of stuck out there for a while. And I think that's where the miss veered off.
You heard it here, folks. Brett fucked it up. So thanks, Brett. But I'm glad we got that settled. Again, it is really nice to finally meet you. You have like a lot of Northeast people of my age, you've been a big part of the weed scene for as long as I've been a part of it. So, the early mid 90s. And you've been building your own personal brand basically since then, since the 90s. And I think the first weed I smoked that wasn't brick, right, was I think a cut of ChemD, and that was maybe in 94, 95, something like that. I don't know if that timeline checks out or if it was real, but that's my recollection. That's the story I've been saying all these years, so I'm sticking to it. This was like the thickest part in my life of the war on drugs, right? Like Just Say No was still hot. Like Reagan was still around, right? So Nancy was still saying just say no. I had just come out of the DARE program, which was a huge, government funded brainwashing exercise that I think was effective for the most part. So I want to start and talk about passion, because I think that's clearly what's driven you your entire life. It's perhaps a love for the plant, but mostly like this passion to succeed. So I want to kind of talk about that a little bit and your passion for it, and kind of coming up in the 90s a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been I'll be 49 in like a week, so I've been in this knee deep for about 33 years, been growing for over 30 years. I just always had I don't know if it was, I actually used to go back to the DARE thing. When I was in school, I think it was like seventh grade, the DARE officer actually lit up a joint when he was doing it, and like wanted us to all smell it in the room to what marijuana smells like. I wonder if I remember my traumatic cop memory from the DARE was the briefcase. I don't know if you had the briefcase.
Oh yeah. Yep. So for people listening, there was a briefcase, and you would open it, and there was a piece of plexiglass on top, and there was compartments inside. It was literally like an attaché case that your dad might take to work in the 80s.
Or a Hunter S. Thompson case we take to
exactly. To like fish store or something. And in each compartment was drugs, right? Do you remember
Or a
this?
pipe, a drug. Yeah, it was like little samples of like coke and hair, like just little samples of everything. There was a hash pipe, I remember, hash, all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff, you know.
That to
So
me had the exact opposite effect that I think that they were going for. I was like, wow, what the hell?
yeah, and I think after, you know, the whole passion thing, I've always like, I never started early smoking. I probably was like 16 when I started. But when I started smoking, it was really only my thing. I didn't really drink much, didn't do any other drugs much. Um, Definitely some psychedelics, lots of those, which are great. They're great.
We'll get to Grateful Dead. It's
But
further down my questions list.
yeah, the passion I think just started early on. I just always started, I smoked some herb and just really enjoyed it and was like, wow, this is great. You know, maybe I didn't see all the medicinal purposes that it has now back then, but it did a lot of it. You know, it put me where I am right now. With meeting a ton of people, it brought a lot of people together, and I have a passion for it. I don't know why. I was born with it, I guess. You know, I really still to this day I have a really passion for the herb, for sure.
Well, I'm always curious about that because it's not a terribly unique entrepreneurial characteristic, right? That drive for success is generally, in my opinion, fueled by a passion for a thing. So, you know, Michael Jordan.
Pardon.
I'm wearing Jordans, people. I know what I'm talking about. Michael Jordan, you know, passionate about basketball, like lived and breathed that. Like all these people who I've spoken to on past podcasts, or, you know, the entrepreneurial drive to perfect something is deep within the DNA of very successful entrepreneurs, in my opinion. And I read this in, I think it must have been Danny Danko's article on you a couple years back. By the way, we'll link Danny Danko's podcast in the description below. He was a great person to talk to. But I think it was in that article I read that your mother plant is 30 years old, or it must be a little older than that now. But
this is my
is that
original.
true?
My original
Your cut.
1091 strain is 31 years old plus. I don't have the original mom because after years you have to, you know, you should remom anyway.
Yeah.
Just for, you know, purposes. And it was just, yeah, I actually don't keep big moms. I just keep recloning, you know, that's my thing. But I have the original clone from 31, you know, the original same cut from 31 years ago.
So do you
I have
remember
all my strains though.
You still do, and that just kind of proves my point, is like, you know, you have to be a scholar of what you're doing, right? You're your best scholar.
And you have to back them up with your really close friends.
Totally. And I think there is another, and this is, you know, the clout aspect, especially in the cannabis industry, very heavy. Having the best product, having the best, you know, the highest, whatever it is, the you know, best terpene profile or highest THC, whatever you classify the best as, and I'm sure you have many classifications for that. You have a high, you know, a high bar of threshold there. So yeah, that stuff that's exactly what I would thought you would have said. Yeah.
And that's what I do with what, you know, working for Canna Provisions and Smash Hits. That's, I'm trying to provide the best possible flower we can provide in the recreational market, you know. And that's one thing about having good passion for it, is I'm my hardest critic. So I make sure that anything that comes out of our facility or that's going in the stores that has at least a Smash Hits Canna Provisions label on it is backed up by my, you know, my overall check, basically.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's all about, you know, high flavor, terpene, just a combination of things. A lot of my strains are very tasty. It's one thing that I strive for in strains, that, you know, tasteful, to have a good high to them.
I think a good analogy for you is like, it's as if the Rolling Stones cover band was able to hire Keith Richards to play guitar for them. That was kind of the get of you. It's like you, and it's kind of what we're talking about. You know, you've spent, you put so much time and effort into building this personal brand that you have. You know, I'm sure that there was many dispensaries interested in kind of having conversations with you, but it's, you know, you obviously made the right decision. With Meg and the team at Canna Provisions. It's awesome. I want to talk a little bit about the Grateful Dead, if we can. not the first or last time that they will come up in as a, you know, topic of conversation in this podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about, because I was reading about Dead Tour 91, and I was 11 at the time, so I missed that tour. It didn't happen for me, but I'm kind of curious about why that was so important. It's such a melding, like what people might not know about lots of bands, but the Grateful Dead or Fish in particular, is that there's this lot scene. There's this, you know, people are aware of the nomadic nature of, you know, these types of fans. But there's a whole, like a true community, a whole economic, with its own economy in the parking lots of these big concerts, which I am, you know, definitely, you know, yeah, I know all about them. It's how I came up too, but I'm curious about that tour.
Yeah, back then it was almost like the Grateful Dead lot was like social media almost. It was like, you know, way to interact. But so 1991, I graduated high school at that point, Northampton High School. I was born and raised in Northampton, Mass. I graduated high school and me and my friend were like, let's do this whole summer tour this year, this one, you know? Because before I could only go to certain shows because I had to get through I couldn't miss more than 18 days of school. So I could only do certain fall shows and spring shows. I did over 221 Dead shows with Jerry. So, and I was 16 when I started. So from 16 to, you know, till he passed away, I went pretty hard. But that year was very special. I just graduated high school. There was no herb around though. It was very, very summery, droughty 91. So we drove, got to Indianapolis. It was actually Noblesville, Indiana, Deer Creek. I was like, I need to find some bud. So I'm like, I'm gonna go out in the lot and just, you know, go in the lot. And it was a big party scene at the Dead. So you could just go and pretty much there's everybody vending all sorts of stuff. Everything, you know. So finally these guys are like kind bud, and they look like normal dudes. They had a plate from Colorado, they had a Subaru. I'm like, let's see what these guys got. So went over and they're like, we got some, you know, dog bud, they called it. And I started talking. I'm like, all right, I'll take whatever I can. They would only allow me like a half ounce. So I could only get 2 quarters. And it was 125 a quarter. So I was like, oh, yeah. And being 17
in 91. Yeah. Exactly. And being a teenager. Exactly. Might as well have been $1 million.
So it was probably the best 250 I spent. Luckily, I exchanged phone numbers with these guys back then on my index card because there wasn't cells. We might have had a cell phone, but not like, it wasn't like, you know, Motorola flip phone. I don't know if we did back then, but anyway, exchange phone numbers.
Had a Rolodex.
And I dodled out that half ounce for that whole tour, like 2 bowls, a bowl a show I smoked, like, you know, so I'd have enough for the whole tour. Yep. Some of the best tasting pot I've ever smoked at that point in my life. So green and crystally and skunky and just awesome. So tour ends. I'm like, fuck, that was what now? Where do I go now? Nothing's going to compare to any of this. So I reached out on the phone number thinking that maybe they didn't give me the right phone number because back then you go to prison, jail for shit. And sure enough, Joe B answered the phone and he's like, hey, you know, we talked and ended up making some sort of transaction to get me some pot back on the East Coast. And I had an ounce of Chemdog sent back to the East Coast. It was $500 still. And that's probably why they were making tons of money off it. But that ounce had originally 13 seeds in it. And that was August of 91. And by December of 91, by the end of December of 91, I had harvested my first Chem 91 plant. So probably what you were smoking in 93, 94 was probably the original Chemdog 91. I started the Chemdog D in 2000, kind of like my millennial seed.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of strains that spawned off from those, you know, the Chemdog Sister, the Chem 4, the Jeezel, the Snow Dog.
Classics.
Power, OG Coach, you know. So, and the Chem 4, I ended up linking back up with the guys that sold me the bud on the forums. I think it was Overgrow on the online forums. Linked back up with
birth of the internet, the birth of the mainstream internet.
Exactly. In 2006, I sent them back 4 of my original seeds out of my original 13 seeds. And that's when he started the Chem 4. He's out of my original seeds. So I had him start that one. So
that's amazing.
That's that story.
That's the beauty of that lot scene. And just to take it a step further, the Roseland, you know, the fish shows also had a similar you know, profound effect on you professionally, right? Is that the birth of Sour Diesel?
So there was some it could have, that was kind of I believe from the crew down in New York that was at the Roseland was the birth of Sour Diesel, but it was also when I met the guys from New York who I got the Super Skunk from, which I traded them a cut of my Chem 91, and that's where the Mass Super Skunk came from. which is got pretty famous out there for a while too.
Yeah, big
So,
time. Yeah,
the sour,
absolutely.
there's still a lot of there's still a lot of conflicts of who who actually started that particular seed. So they'll amongst themselves will argue. So I don't even want to get into that with them. That that's a whole different.
I'm gonna get into it. It was you. You did it. And thank you. So that's super interesting. I actually heard that story. Like I read it in maybe Danny's article or something,
Yeah.
but I can remember actually hearing that story on Fish Store, years later. Because that, I'm a little bit younger than you are, not by much, but a little bit younger. So I missed, the Grateful Dead, but I went to all the Fish shows, and that was one of
Fish shows.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to sell Page's weed.
There you go.
I used to go up to Vermont all the time and drop it right off to him. If he's in your phone,
still here waiting for you.
Yeah. So yeah. I was actually pretty
I
good
remember
friends
hearing
with
that
Paige.
story.
They're pretty good friends. In fact, after Coventry, I went and hung out with Paige at his house right after that show, and we just reminisced on the whole
Just
fucking
cried.
last 10 years. Yeah, pretty much. It was a weird night. It was fun.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
just
Sad. Yeah, I think there's nothing worse than seeing Trey cry on stage. That's the worst. But regardless, it's awesome that impact of just meeting people. Really this boils down to networking.
Exactly.
If we're gonna hold to the theme of the the entrepreneurial theme of this this discussion and these podcasts, it's networking. Whether you're doing it at a fish lot, dead lot, or in a boardroom, or like at a a mixer or whatever, like you have to get out there, because that's how you're going to get out of your own bubble, your own head. You're going to meet new people who have a different perspective and maybe have different experiences that can for sure impact yours.
And that's another thing. Back in the early 90s and stuff, that's when I knew I had something special. When you're going to all these different shows, whether it's Fish or the Grateful Dead, and you're going into all these different circles, and you're like, wow, man, you got some of the best herb around. So when you're hearing it from hundreds of different people that you got something special. So I knew early on, and by 95 that I had, like, this is, obviously I preserved it all this, between me and I had a Skunk VA helped preserve it. He was another friend of ours that helped preserve it. When I didn't have it, we always had it. It was always held in our group.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome. And that's the power of networking and focusing on building your own brand.
Especially being able to bring it back to Canna Provisions and start up smash hits with these guys with all these great strains, just to get them out to the people,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a legitimate platform that you now have to do your thing. But I'm curious, going back to that Dead show, like, and just speaking on the passion side of things, like, had you been growing at all before then? Like, before you got these seeds, had you ever even grown before? Or
so that was 91 when I got those seeds. Right before that, I had actually grew up like some bag seed in my brother's closet. I wasn't even. I just I'm like, dude, I'm gonna grow a plant in your closet because he had his own apartment, So I just hijacked it and just did. He was older than me too. I just did it, and it just,
that's hilarious.
That was like the first time I really grew, and then the second time I really grew was the Chem 91, which I really struck gold. You
just hit it right out of the park, right?
Yeah.
Almost out of the gate.
You're really.
That's so funny that you grew in your brother's apartment or whatever, because I did the exact thing, except my brother was younger, so he was probably 7 at the time, or maybe 10.
Yeah.
And it was in our parents' house, like in his closet, and my parents like, why is there an electric cord going into the closet? Like, what is
funny.
Yeah, it didn't go so good for me. The theme of this podcast is understanding that journey that the entrepreneurs and professionals go on when building their business, their empire. What we now call the legacy market is unsurprisingly where most of the people in this industry started. And this can create, I imagine, many emotions when, you're going through the thought process of like, am I outing myself? That's pretty scary. Or, my experience is completely underground. Who would hire me? Like, how do I put that on a resume? Also very scary. I'm curious if you can walk me through that part of your life where you're, maybe finally faced with the decision or realization that it's time to do this differently, or it's time to really take this to the masses. Because I think the timing of it all was probably pretty good.
I mean, I got in trouble in 2011. Pretty much took all my money, my car, pretty much stripped everything from me. Didn't have to do no time, but they took a lot of stuff. About 350 grand, to be honest. And at that point, I was just like, I'm going to start going back. I also got blow glass. So I was like, I'm going to go back to blowing glass for a little while. And I just did that for income purposes. At that point, I realized I probably want to do something with cannabis, but I just don't know what and how and when. So it was like the time that I took off to where I am now, meeting Eric and Meg. It was like a perfect gap to figure out what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be in the market in the end, but I didn't want to move out to Colorado and California. I've gotten some offers to do that. I want to stay here with my family, and this is where I want to be, in Massachusetts. So, and just the opportunity came with Eric and Meg. That was perfect timing on my end, and me wanting to get into the market, the regular market. And it still is. I still look over my back, even though I'm completely legal growing, it's in you. So I feel that, the timing was right with me getting in trouble. It was like another 8-9 years after that I figured out what I wanted to do. But I think the gap, I think where I am now is good. Would have been a better timing than if I didn't get in trouble. I probably would have gotten into some other crazy, crappy deal, and it might not have panned out the way it should have panned out. So timing's everything in the world, about everything.
For sure. And in your case, and I'm sure this is relatable across the industry, it's like, not to be cliche, but everyone's lemonade is different, right? And you gotta learn how to make it when you get thrown some lemons. So
that's true.
I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of your run-ins with the law, because this seems like maybe an obvious statement, but to me, that is what we would call in business a failure, right? Like, we have our successes and we have our failures, and it's important to learn from both of those things. Yours is obviously like the ultimate form of that, where you're, going to jail and getting arrested or whatever. And, your entire livelihood is taken away from you. Why didn't you give up?
I had already been, this was 2011. So it had been a good solid 20 years at that point.
Yep.
That you just don't, after 20 years of doing my passion, that's why I didn't give up.
That's exactly right.
Passion.
Exactly right.
By now, passion.
What are you going to do? Like, learn how to do a whole, like, find
I
a new passion?
I could have done a lot of things. It just, it was my passion that kept me where I am, for sure.
I imagine, and if I'm projecting incorrectly, excuse me, but I imagine for sure there was at least a brief window of time where you might have had to convince yourself to keep going, or did you experience that?
Yeah, I did actually. Right after I got busted, I was a little fucking shook. So
sure, I bet.
I will
That's
say,
the perfect time for that.
I will say, that they definitely, roughly and feather, especially, you got the feds, the IRS, the locals, the states, just fucking a million different cops up in your mix. Yep. And, at that point I was 40 at 39 years old or 40. And I never have been in trouble in my life. So just fucking bam, boom, kaboom, big,
the whole thing
at once. Yeah. So after that, I was a little freaked out. In fact, I probably, I had my son full time, so I had to be a dad, and I just was like, and I wasn't going to go to jail. So at that point, I was like, fuck, I got to fucking turn shit around here. And I quit smoking. I had to, because I had to piss in a cup every week for the feds, for my probation. So it did ruffle my feathers a little bit, to where I was like, shit, this isn't maybe what I want to keep pursuing. But then I'm like, you know what? I've been in this too long. I'm who I am. There ain't no turning around now. It's just, the herb brought me back in,
Yep. I hear
she
that.
got me back in. And it's always been kind of a love-hate relationship, but now it's more of a love relationship, because there's been times where it's, it's really fucked you sometimes.
Sure.
good old herb. And
That's
then,
the
you know,
thing about
there's a
passion.
lot of things, whether it's, you know, but then it keeps your passion, keeps you in line of things. So
Yeah. And that's hard. It's hard on relationships sometimes, but when you're, you know, it's your main focus, a lot of those other things unintentionally fall to the wayside. And it's not because they're not important, right? It's because your brain can't stop thinking about this one thing. You know, and
yeah.
I can totally relate to that. And I'm sure people listening can relate to that too. I mean, I try to, you know, try to accomplish in just having these kinds of conversations is the whole just demystification. And especially in the cannabis industry, like, your story sucks. That beginnings, you know, that part's totally sucks. It's not uncommon in this industry. Like, it happens. And the reason people stay in it is because thankfully, the draconian drug laws, some of them have changed and allowed us to stay in this profession. But most importantly, it's actually become a profession and not, you know, an underground legacy, black market, whatever you want to label it.
Yeah, it makes you
Thing.
stronger too.
Yeah,
It makes you
that's
stronger
awesome.
for sure.
So it sounds like kind of that realization came to a head around the time legalization was happening, around the time you met Meg and Eric.
I didn't meet Meg and Eric until 2020, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And that started on a whole different relationship of them buying glass from me to carrying their stores. And it just escalated to Eric coming to my house one day, smoking a joint with him in my kitchen with, you know, up Chemdog, and he was just blown away. We started kicking the ideas around of maybe me coming to work for him part-time and this and that. And it just fruitated to what it did, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. And here you are sitting,
Yeah.
sitting outside of the grow room, the
Yes.
bright grow room. I want to talk a little bit about innovation, which, you know, for you, you know, boils down to genetics, picking healthy genetics.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you know, what are you looking for? What, if there are any growers listening to this, and growers aren't a huge part of our audience here, but if there are people in cultivation listening, what can they take away from you in figuring out, like, what makes a good cut, what makes a good, you know,
Genetics are important. I go for the taste and the smell factor. It's, believe it or not, if that goes along with, if that's usually good, you usually get good numbers out of it, believe it or not. Sounds crazy. A lot of times I can smell a bud and be like, this is going to be fire. And then you can smell a bud and be like, this is crap. Any bud that smells like musty or moldy or like has that little wang to it, it's going to taste like that. It's going to be a train wreck right from the start. In fact, I'm judging this competition called NECAN right now that's going on. And there was like 63
there next week.
Yeah. There's like 63 samples to judge. And I'll tell you, some of the stuff is great. And I give almost all the stuff that I smelled that was great turned out to be really good. And the shit that had a bad smell, it's just crap. And it just didn't even get you high. So you can really tell a lot from taste and smell, at least if you have a good nose. But I look for flavor. I look for, you obviously you don't test it until you get it obviously grown a few times, or, sell it in the store. So testing is always a big factor as far as like keeping it in the stable. But I know all my strains, but when I'm starting a new strain, I look for, as far as like vigor, how it grows, how it, if it's a bush, if it's tall, if it stretches, if it stays, if the internodes, short internode length, if the stock has a smell on it in the beginning, you can tell a lot of things, leaf structure. And then you got to grow out seeds at least a couple times. Even a brand new clone, you got to grow out a few times just to even give it a fair chance, especially seeds. I feel like you need to grow seeds for a year. I mean, like at least 3 cycles. Yeah, a true example of what you want,
Yeah.
So I feel like starting with good strains in the beginning, you will succeed. You start with these crappy strains, you're going to go all over the board. You want to find stuff that stands out too. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got a lot of the same stuff out there. A lot of the purple weeds, there's runts galore out there. It's time to retire runts or change it up.
You heard it here, folks. Runts, you're out.
It's tasty as hell. Don't get me wrong.
Sure. There's better alternatives. And I think you're right. It boils down to, what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like?
I mean, I'm from Massachusetts, so I'm a gas guy.
Yeah,
So I like
same.
all gas, all
Yep.
gas, no brakes for me.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Can you talk a little bit, the office stoners, of which I count myself here, we're especially hyped on your live resin project. Can you
Oh,
talk a little bit about that?
so the TreeWorks Canna Provision Smash Hitch collab that we just did with TreeWorks is some of the best live rosin out there. I will say it right now. I've smoked a lot of 710 Labs. I smoked a lot of Laser Cat from Colorado. This stuff holds a fire with any of those. It is fun. It's our first one we dropped was Wonka bars. It's great, and they just did the carts are in stores now. The live rosin carts, fucking killer, phenomenal. And I'm not just saying that. I'm like, I know good product. It's killer
Of
product.
course.
So go to Canna Provisions to get those. We also have in the pipeline coming down is Chem 91.
Coming back.
Tangerland, Stardog, and Chem 91, all live rosin coming from TreeWorks in the stores too. And we're gonna make carts with all those too. Which I think
I'm making the trip to Holyoke.
It's great stuff. Yeah. Let me know when you're there. I'll meet you in person.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be at NECAN, so we'll see you next weekend for sure. I'll try to run into you there. And I've judged one of those, not the NECAN one, but I've judged one of those things too. And I know that feeling of like you're maybe overwhelmed when you open up your judge's kit and you're like, oh yay, free weed. Oh, so much.
I take it so seriously too. I take it
most
seriously.
same. And then you're like, yep. You're like, oh, this is not good. You can just tell just by looking through the jar, like I am not going to enjoy this for sure. I want to talk a little bit because you mentioned earlier, and we talked about it in your introduction, that you are also a prolific glass blower. I want to talk a little bit about the intertwining of, there's a clear line between the glass blowing world and the cannabis industry, like, in the flower world, like it's a pretty tight relationship there. I wonder about the artistic expression side of things. Like, how do you remain creative in what you do? Do those two things kind of coexist together? Is there a correlation beyond the obvious?
No, I mean, not really. The one thing about the creativiness lately is that having to work with Canna Provisions lately, I haven't been able to go in the shop much. So when I do get in the shop, it's nice. It's very like, almost like the break was a nice little, it re-enlightens it, it gets you right back to where you were like 6 years ago. You almost feel new doing it. So, that and just smoking the herb helps me create nice pieces. I started blowing glass in 93, and it was pretty cool going like the Grateful Dead lots in like 94, 95, being able to sell my glass and my bud. So you could really smoke my bud out of a pipe I blew, and back then it was just me. It wasn't Chemdog, it was just Greg. Sure. So
and that was mind blowing, I'm sure.
But for me, it was really cool being able to smoke my own weed through my own pipe that I made, at a show. It was just
absolutely
cool. It was a cool thing.
Oh, for sure. That I can totally respect that. You made the whole thing.
Yeah, it was cool. That's which, by the way, I would have people when people knew in as of 94, 95, when my friends, there wasn't a lot of cell coverage, but when they knew I was going to the lot, people would just run up to me and be like, you got any of that chem for sale? And I'd have to literally limit people to like a bag each person so I could spread it out to all my friends, So back then in the 90s, I was marketing that shit, but no one really knew it, but not even me.
Oh, they knew it. I think you knew what you were doing too. I have a sneaking suspicion you knew exactly what you're doing, which is creating market demand, right? So bringing this back to business is you were building the hype train before hype trains even existed, and building that lot brand, I mean, I can't remember any specifically. I'm sure you can, but there were, when I would go on an extended fish tour or something like that, like there was definitely like the burrito spot that you would hit, like that, get your heady crystal from that, those people that you would see all over the place. So yeah, man, you made your mark, but also with something like truly meaningful to the scene.
Right.
Like really meaningful. You're a huge, obviously, I imagine you're a huge proponent of organic methods.
Yeah.
How is Massachusetts fucking that up for you?
We can't really, our hands are tied on that. You know what I mean? We really can't, you can't say using organics. It's just not, I mean, you could say it, but it's not, nothing's like, oh, I'm, certified and shit like that.
Yes.
And it's kind of tied. It's my, I'll be honest, my hands are a little tied. I could probably do a table or two here, but we have to kind of keep up production and keep things rolling the way we need to keep rolling. So we got to keep our numbers up and our quantity up, So I think I could probably do it. I just need some time to experiment, or there's really no time right now for that. As of right now, we're just expanding here and expanding there. So we're kind of just keeping things afloat and getting things going solid again.
Well, it's
But I would really love to visit on being able to do like one of my rooms here, even like 3 full rows, a couple batches of straight organic flower, once we hit our plateau of leveling out,
Yeah, I imagine like there's certain frustrations of like coming into an industry that is reasonably over regulated, right? Like it kind of makes sense, unfortunately, but it makes sense that it's over regulated. It's this scary thing. We're finally letting the monster out of the closet, but we got to put it in chains and make sure you look at it through a peephole or whatever. We're gonna regulate the crap out of this thing. So I want to talk. Maybe you could talk a little bit about just, and I don't mean this negative or positive or whatever, but there's certain frustrations I imagine in like knowing your craft and maybe being put in a box a little bit.
As far as like using like fertilizers and all other as that kind of stuff goes, that's okay. That doesn't bother me. And the organic stuff isn't that bad. It's the overregulated part of like right now we have so much stuff being tied up in testing with metric and stuff, and that's where I get frustrated, is that kind of department. Besides that, there's really not much from going from the legacy market to this market as far as like that really got to me, as far as like being able to do certain things. I can use whatever we use, that I could at home, that I can here. It's just more or less like the logistics of the testing and the kind of over, that kind of stuff is what gets me frazzled. But it's as far as like growing, the waste stuff, like growing, as far as like weighing up a little waste here and there of a leaf, if it falls off, you're supposed to weigh it. I mean, that stuff's ridiculous, I think. But I've overcome that. First year I was like, this is dumb, but it doesn't, all that stuff doesn't even bother me anymore. What bothers me is the stuff being held up in the metric and the testing and the CCC and all that stuff. And when people want to come and get permits and stuff, it's like it's like they almost hold you hostage for months before they even give you a time to give you an appointment, to give you your license, or, it's crazy, that kind of stuff. But as far as the growing stuff, I don't have that many issues.
Yeah. There's, and what I'm hearing is just passion winning out. Like, it doesn't matter whether you got arrested. It doesn't matter whether, you were selling Ziploc bags and fish tour or dead tour, or dealing with legal, regulations. It's what's the most important is this thing that you have spent, you put in your 10,000 hours and then some, to kind of, paraphrase Malcolm Gladwell, but you've put in the time. You've kind of figured that out. And the most important thing is that passion and that drive to get there. It's like these variables are just going to come at me, and I have to figure out how to jump over them or go around them or whatever. And that's what I'm hearing. That's, the most important part of being an entrepreneur, is that drive and not giving a fuck when someone says you can't do it, because you're going to do it anyway.
It's the only thing you can do is bob and weave, bob and weave.
Hell yeah. Tell me,
find solutions to the problems.
That's my job all day long, is finding solutions for problems. And sometimes I make a few problems too, which I then have to find solutions for. Yeah. I think this is a good place to kind of circle it back around. And I'm curious what's next? Like, what's next for the Canna Provisions brand? What's next for Smash Hits? What's next for your personal brand?
Well, the Smash Hits, Canna Provision stuff, we're just going to keep pumping out. We're introducing some new strains coming up in the next few months. I don't really want to talk about them yet because I haven't narrowed them down, but we're going to be bringing in some new strains. We're going to also be bringing in a nice sativa, has a good, a nice nose to it. We just going to keep doing our rosin things. I eventually think we're going to go into getting some edibles down the line, doing our own line of that stuff. Just a matter of time with that. And we are just going to keep pumping out the most beautiful product we can for
Yeah,
New
you are.
England, and I'm always going to keep bringing in trying to bring new things in, keep everybody on their toes, and just keep doing the best we can for Canna Provisions, and eventually I am going to have my own brand in the market, my own brand, which I think I should. Everybody else has a brand out there, but
we are all eagerly
I'll
awaiting
figure it
that.
out.
We
Yep.
can't wait for that to happen for sure.
Yep.
Exciting things, innovation, passion. Chem, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I know that there's been that voice that's been behind you the whole time. All those ladies behind you have been saying, Greg, come back, come talk to us. So I'll let you get back to the grow room. Thank you so much. Tell the people who are listening, watching, where they can find out more about you, smash hits, Canna Provisions.
Yeah, you can find our products, Smash Hits, the brand, at Canna Provisions in Holyoke. It's in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And you can also find them in Canna Provisions in Lee. And that's right off the Mass Turnpike in Lee, Massachusetts. We're going to be introducing all, new stuff soon. And we always got new flavors coming out the pipeline. So, again, thank you for having me, Will. I appreciate it. And please go out and get yourself some smash hits, and also go on our website, and that's cannaprovisions.com. And you can find on our blog a bunch of stuff about me and about other stuff that we're doing. We do a lot of community stuff and a lot of good things for the community too.
Let me add what a beautiful website it is, by the way.
That's good.
What a beautiful website. My team had a lot of fun building that for you guys. Thank you so much.
Nice.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning into this episode of SENSimilla. We will see you next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.